Welcome everyone to Kingdom Livin. I'm the Reverend Brooke Ashley.
I'm Justin Stacy.
And I'm Justin Bowling.
And we're going to take a moment to pray. Shall we pray?
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Okay, Brooke, so you kind of set us up for this Kingdom Livin in the last podcast. So remind us what we are talking about today.
Well, the last podcast, we talked about salvation, and you had made the comment in a previous podcast about the process of salvation. And so we got some flack about that. And we just took some time to explain our ideas of salvation and where that came from. And I asked the question, what does it look like to be saved? And it was in the context of a conversation about how the way we believe changes how we act. And I gave the example of, if you believe that a bus is coming at a certain time, you stand on the corner and wait for the bus. And if you didn't believe the schedule, you wouldn't stand on the corner. Or we believe in the notion of gravity, so we don't throw ourselves off of a building. So what we believe should, if we believe it strongly enough, change the way we behave and the way we act. So what does it look like to be saved?
And after you asked that, obviously, we all gave perfect responses without any sort of hesitation, no thinking involved, and we just moved on, right?
We did. We were all like, I don't even think about this a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's a loaded question. Like, it's something you don't really think about. What does it mean to be saved? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think the look like is what kind of threw me for a loop type thing.
Yeah, what does it look like? Yeah. And I think that's the more interesting question, because what does it mean to be saved? I think you could translate that a little differently and say, what does it mean to be a Christian? Because you would equate both of those together. But what does it look like to be saved? That's probably the more interesting question. And I don't know that I want to go first on that.
Okay, I'll go first. I've asked around over the last week or so to different people, what does it look like to you to be saved? And I've got a lot of interesting answers back, some of which I agreed with and some that I didn't. I got a couple what I'll call churchy answers, right? Like, you go to church, you go to Sunday school, you read your Bible, you pray, and I think for all of us at some point in our lives, we've gone to church, we've gone to worship services, we've done whatever out of a sense of obligation, right? Like, this is what we're supposed to do, so we're going to get up on Sunday morning and do it. Which I think in all of our lives, we have moments like that attending church is an obligation that we fulfill. And what I'll say to folks is that even when you don't feel like going to church, you still need to go. That even, I hope that it doesn't stay as an obligation, but there is something about the actual act of getting yourself up and going and being with other believers that is super important to your faith journey. Because I think we're constantly asked to do things that we don't want to do. And it reminds us of where our priorities are. So there, I'm off my preacher.
No, what we do shapes who we are. So even if it is hard at first, it can transform us by doing something like that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I do. If we have listeners out there who are not regular churchgoers, what I want them to know is that those of us who are, there are some of us who remember what it was like to walk into a church for the first time. And it's not always easy. It's kind of scary. I mean, you don't know what to expect. For Pete's sakes, you don't know where to park or what door to come in or where the bathrooms are or where to sit or what you're supposed to be wearing. I mean, I think now with so many churches doing virtual things, you kind of get a feel for who they are. But I think you'll find that most churches are just happy that you're there. And so just go. Like anything worth doing is uncomfortable at first. So, okay. So that I'm off of my soapbox, my second soapbox. But I think you're right. I mean, what we do shapes who we are. So, I mean, I got some of those churchy things, and I'll be the first to say that I probably am not as faithful of a scripture reader as a lot of other people. Like, I have to be careful that all of my scripture reading doesn't just come because of work, right? Like, I'm not sermon prepping or teaching or whatever. So I don't want people to think that, well, if I'm just not like pumped up to read the scriptures every day for an hour, that somehow I'm not saved. Like I really struggle with some of that. So one of the things that somebody said to me, I've gone back to over and over again, and I asked the question, what does it look like to be saved? And this was a young adult who said to me, it means that you aren't looking out for your own self all the time, that you are more concerned about what the world needs and what other needs from you than what you need from everybody else. And I thought, there's some unpacking in that. You know, I think I would have added, when you're more concerned about what God is calling you to do and how God has equipped you to benefit his church and his creation. I think that's part of what that looks like. I think being willing to take a risk for your faith, it is a sign of salvation. And I think that looks different for everybody.
Yeah, I think the most important thing for me is becoming more and more Christ-like in my life. And as you said in the previous podcast, you know, we should always be moving forward in our faith journey, and we should not be the same as we were when we started, because if we are, then we're failing. We're doing something wrong there. So I think part of the salvation journey is becoming more and more Christ-like. And when you become more and more Christ-like, you are becoming more self-sacrificial. You're not doing things out of your own self-interest, out of what you need. You are always putting others first. You're showing love to others, especially neighbors, especially foreigners, especially enemies. Like people, like when you get to the level of Christ, you're showing that same love to everyone. It doesn't matter what they look like, who they are. And as we've also mentioned before, the hardest part to do in showing love to someone is when we consider them an enemy. But if you can get to that point, then that's being saved. Like, you are becoming more and more Christ-like. And if you are willing to lay down your life for your friends, for your neighbors, for your enemies, then that is Christ. I mean, that is the salvation process. To me, that's what that looks like for a Christian. Now, do we ever get to that point? Probably not, but we should strive for it. We should do what we can prayerfully with the relationship we have, the gift that we have, the grace that we have that God gives us. We should use that to try and become as much like Christ as we can in this life. And I think that's the best we can do. And that's what salvation, to me, that's what that looks like. We're just always trying to do the best that we can. I'll give you an example. So one of the things that has always been, it's always hit me emotionally, is homelessness. Like, seeing someone homeless anywhere, it always tugs on my heartstrings, right? And I don't immediately jump to, well, are they faking it? Are they? You hear that a lot. You see that a lot. You actually see a lot of, like, police departments advising, don't give things to these people because they're faking it, whatever. But my mind doesn't go there. It immediately goes to, there's something I've got to do to help this person. Regardless of what the situation really is, I need to do something. So probably 7-8 years ago, I guess, there was this young guy. He was probably around my age. he was at the exit 7 in Bristol, and he had a dog with him. So that even hit me harder to see a dog with him. And, he had a sign. And, I think he was just asking for food or money or whatever. So I stopped and I gave him some money. And what was interesting at this time, I was actually pretty short on cash. Like, I did not have a lot at that time. So we were actually going to give him the money that we had allotted to go out and eat. So I think we were going to go to Olive Garden or something. And that's pretty much the money that we had at the time. And I decided, no, we're not doing that now. Like, I have got to help this guy. So me and my wife talked it over, and we're like, okay, we can eat cheaper. We're going to help this guy. So, I gave him some money. But after I gave him some money, that wasn't good enough. I mean, I felt that God was telling me, you can do more. So I get my credit card out and I go get him a hotel for the night. I really could not have afforded to have done that at that time. Like, that was something that I wouldn't have dreamed of doing. But I did, because I just couldn't stand. I couldn't have slept if I'd not done that, because I felt like God was telling me, this is what you need to do for this guy. And luckily, it found a pet-friendly hotel, so the dog was able to go too. So I was able to provide him money and shelter for at least that one day. And I questioned, if I didn't have that relationship with God, would I have that same conviction to have done that? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But I believe that that's part of the salvation process, is that maybe if I didn't have the relationship with God, and I really don't want to go down the road of, it's because I'm a Christian that I'm doing good things. Like, that's not what I'm trying to say here. What I'm trying to say is, God spoke to me that day and told me what I needed to do. It was up to me to make the decision to do it or not. And I did it. Now, if I didn't have that open relationship with God, would I have felt that same conviction? Would have that same heartstring thing been there? I don't know the answer to that. But I feel like this is part of what it means to be saved. If I wasn't in the relationship with God, maybe I would have just gave a few dollars and moved on. But to me, that was just part of God speaking to me and me responding in a more Christ-like way.
Well,
Yeah.
you have something to say. You look like you're about to say something. I was like,
No, I thought you had something, so I didn't want to interrupt you. But no, I think you're entirely right. To me, that agape self-sacrificial love that truly only comes supernaturally is a hallmark of being a Christian. But I don't think a lot of the answers you receive, Brooke, are entirely off base either. Like, when you think of, like, what does it look like to be a Christian? What do people see? It's not always like the meta picture, the bigger picture. It's sometimes like these individual actions. And so, like, you look at something like 1 John talks a lot about this, and it gives like almost like a long list of things. And those aren't wrong. I think it's hard to kind of nail down a perfect list, because there's always going to be, we're not making a prescription of what it looks like to be saved. There's always going to be some kind of, like, relationship and growing and stuff like that. But I do think there's two ways you can kind of look at it. Two things that people see, I should say. Like, there's the things that you do and things that you don't do. And that's really what you look at when you think of, like, when you're talking about your sins. You talk about sins of omission, sins that you actually did. So, like, in the mea culpa at the beginning of Mass, we say, like, forgive me for things that I've done and things that I failed to do. And I think that's on a day-to-day basis what people see. And again, like, there's not a perfect list of things like that, But I do think there's a couple things we can kind of focus on. One being what you all have already touched on, that self-sacrificial love, putting others first, and minimizing what's good for you, what's best for me, that kind of greedy self nature that we're all born with.
Mhm.
But I do think another point that I kind of want to bring up with you all is I also feel like it's important that people know where that is coming from.
Right.
Maybe it's not necessarily like I think there's a tendency to kind of emphasize like, oh, I have to talk about God in every speech every time I'm given a public platform, and that's not what I'm going for. But I do think if you've known somebody long enough, they should know where your hope is coming from, and I think that hope's really the important part there, like where that's originating from. Like if you've been in a relationship with somebody for a long time and they don't know that you're married, that's kind of would be surprising. And the same thing would be surprising, I think, if you're in a relationship with somebody for a while and they don't know that you're a Christian. So I think people should know where that's coming from. Any thoughts on that? Or am I totally off base? And
No,
going
I
down
think
there,
you're
like,
right.
I have to use up my public platform and say like, God, I have to fit God into any conversation possible.
So like I kind of have an issue, especially after sporting events, when the microphone's in somebody's face.
That's exactly what I was
I
thinking.
need to give God all the glory. Like sometimes that's genuine, and I feel like sometimes it's put on, right? Like I'm happy that folks feel like they need to do that or they want to do that, but I don't feel like as a Christian, every time I open my mouth, I should be like, hello, I'm Brooke Ashley, and I'm a Christian. Let me tell you about Jesus. But I do think that it's really important that our acts of mercy and compassion are followed up when the time is appropriate with a conversation about why we're doing that. So if y'all, this is what I did for a living for many, many years, is run Ministries of Mercy. And what I found is you have churches that do a couple of things. They make you earn their services, possibly. Like, you have to attend worship before you get a meal, or you have to do this, you have to do that. Or they give you things and they never tell you why, right? Yep. They don't want to impede on you. And then there's like that happy medium, like, hey, we're doing this for you because we love you, because you're a child of God, and we see value in you because we know that God sees value. I mean, there's ways to go about having that conversation. And what I like to tell people is when you're called to do something, if you're called to feed people, but do it in a way that glorifies and honors God, right? Like do it in a way that you're so extravagant in your hospitality. And I don't mean you have to serve them filet mignon and lobster, right? But you're so extravagant in your hospitality that they want to know why you're being nice to them. Like, why are you going over the top? So, I think, Stacey, about your example of you gave him your money, like that was sacrificial, right? But then you said, that's not enough. I'm going to go the extra mile for you. That gentleman's probably had people hand him stuff all the time. But I think that extra thing is really what we're called about. I hope at some point we can have a whole podcast on what authentic Christian hospitality looks like and what it doesn't, because it's so much more than donuts and coffee on Sunday mornings, and it's kind of my thing in the church. But I agree with you. Like, where's your hope? Like, it's been a rough season for me. Like, that's not a secret. I mean, we've had lots of trauma and turmoil, and things could have been really bad. I mean, they were bad enough, but I know that they could have been worse, and through it all, though, I feel very blessed. And to be able to see that silver lining and know that, God holds me and loves me and weeps with me, is very comforting. And it shows to folks, like, when you truly believe that. So I was thinking about something you were talking about, Stacey, about sacrificial giving, right? Like being willing to sacrifice for others. And I can remember thinking early on in my walk with Christ that I didn't know if there were things that I was willing to do. Like when people would talk about this, like, would I be willing to take on the cost of somebody's hotel room? So like, I was thinking, oh my gosh, what if the guy trashes the room? Stacey's going to be responsible for that. Like I go to some of the legal, because that's what I did for so long. And I remember, so there's a hymn in our United Methodist hymnal called Here I Am, Send Me. And we lovingly called it the missionary hymn. So everywhere that I went to speak as a missionary, the church has always played the song. So it became one of my favorites. And I remember hearing that and thinking, am I really willing to go wherever God wants me to go? Like, would I be willing to leave my family behind, and not just my nuclear family, but and go to Africa or California or wherever? And I felt really guilty because there was a part of me that was like, I don't know that I would be. And I think it's important to understand that God's not going to call all of us to do that. Right? God doesn't call us all to do that, but God calls us all to do something. And that's part of that being, what does salvation look like? What does it look like to be saved? And I think it's in trusting in that God is with you, and the way that you act tells me sometimes if I really think you think that or not. I mean, if you're constantly counting the cost and not able to look at the gain that may come from a risk that you're taking for your church or for Christ or whatever, then I'm going to question where you are. And maybe you're really early on. And I think that's something also we have to remember. Somebody who is a baby Christian, somebody who is just beginning to follow Christ, is not going to look like the same person that has been intimately following Christ for 20 years. And they shouldn't. And I think as the church, what we do a lot of times is expect people outside of the church who don't even know who Jesus is to act like somebody who's been following Jesus for the majority of their life. And that's really unfair. So I guess
I love that, because I love the idea of that going the extra mile type thing. Like literally from, Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. Like if somebody asks you to go 1 mile, go 2. It's the whole, and I think that's why I was saying, like, it originates from your hope, the hope we have in Christ. It's something that seems hopeless, or something that seems to make no sense. We see that there's a potential hope, supernatural hope in Christ. That space LV of Paul saying, in hope we're saved, because that's what he's saying. Like this hope, let's just take actions that others would not take, because we have that given to us from Christ. That's what saves us.
Yeah, and I think that we have to be willing to take up our cross.
Mm-hmm.
I think God calls us to do that as Christians. And I believe that we have to get away from the idea that once we become a Christian, everything is going to be rainbows and unicorns, and we're just waiting for the end of time, for Jesus' second coming, or a rapture, if we believe that. We're just waiting for that hope, but we're not really called to do anything else, and I feel like that's part of the whole rapture idea, is like, there's going to be tribulations, there's going to be hard times, but because we're Christians, we get away from that. No, like we are going to go through it. We have to be willing to go through it. We have to be willing to take up our cross and to respond as Jesus did. And if it means giving up our life, look at the first disciples. They had to give up their life.
Yep. 11 of the 12 martyred.
Yeah. So what if we were called to do that? How would we respond?
Yeah, I think it's hard. I mean, I see where you're going with this, but I think this conversation freaks non-Christians out. Like, they're like, what the heck? Like, but if you think about it in small increments, like you get to that point. Like, I don't think anybody who says, I desire to follow Jesus on Monday, by Wednesday is ready to say, I'll sacrifice it all for you, if that's what it takes. Yep. And here's the other thing. I don't think that God just calls us to give up our lives. Like, there has to be some kind of something that's coming out of that, or we're being persecuted because of our beliefs in Jesus. So I just want folks to know that, like, God's not going to say to you, oh, you're a follower of Jesus Christ, and now I'm going to take your life from you to see how loyal you are to me. Right. Like, it's not a test. But I do think it happens in increments. And, this idea of pride, of thinking I should get my way because I want it this way. I mean, we die to that or need to die to that on a daily basis. And when we talk about losing our lives, I mean, there are Christians who lose their life. They actually die because of their faith. But we're not always talking about that. Sometimes it's figuratively. Sometimes it's giving up a dream of yours because God's calling you somewhere else. And sometimes the dream that you have, God's going to use, and it's a God-given dream. And it's why it's so important to have a community of people around you to help you discern that. I mean, I don't know how many people who have come to me and said, I'm called to be a pastor. And I'm looking at that person saying, oh, you can't even, like, you demand where you're going to eat every day. And if you don't eat there, there's hell to pay. Like, that's not going to work. Like, you have to have some sense of humility.
Have you seen the meme of Jesus where he has built like a chair, and the arms and stuff of the chair, it's just all over the place, and then he tells Joseph, he says, Dad, I think I'm going to go into ministry, and he's like, thank God.
Yeah. Because you ain't a carpenter. So yeah, I mean, I just, I think we have to be a little careful about our talk with laying our life down. I've often, as a mom, said I would be willing to lay my life down to make sure that my children survive. Like, I would do that without hesitation. I would also do that without hesitation for Christ, but I don't know that I could always say that. So I don't want people to think if they're not there yet, then they're questioning their salvation.
Yeah. And I want to also, I guess, reiterate that just because I'm bringing this up as what I think is sort of the proper Christ-like responses, it doesn't mean that's what I would do. Like, I don't know how many times I would say, yes, I would lay my life down in certain situations. Like you said, for family, absolutely. No question. For Christ, like if it's in a situation where you have to deny Christ, and if you do, you live, and if you don't, you die, I would die for that. But in other situations where, well, this person you don't know is over here, you lay your life down for them, I would have to think, like, that would be a struggle for me.
You've got people who are in careers that put their life on the line all the time, and they're not doing it because they're followers of Christ.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, I think that's what we have. I think it's just a word of caution on that. But I don't know. It's kind of, also, I think the caution here is this sense of false humility. People who never stand up for themselves or always just go with the flow. I mean, you've got to be careful that that's not what you think Christ is calling you to do as well. Christ isn't saying be weak and mild, but you, in how you go about doing it, says a whole lot more about where you are in your walk with Jesus than whether you're willing to stand up and rock the boat or take a stand on something or disagree with somebody, which is also another tenet of authentic Christian hospitality, just saying.
Yeah, I think it's in that your self-sacrificial stuff is for the good of the other, not necessarily just to lay over and let them get whatever they want type thing. Like, it's you're really looking for somebody else to flourish, not that you're looking for somebody else to, get their own greedy ways or something like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's love your neighbor as yourself. And I think we forget that as yourself sometimes. And we put ourselves down, or we don't. So just yesterday, this person gave me a compliment and I just kind of let it go. And we were texting back and forth, and she said, I see you deflecting that compliment. I see you not taking the compliment. Like, she called me out on it. She was like, hey. And I was like, you know what? You're totally right. Like, it makes me uncomfortable. And so
I'm terrible at that too. I'm 100% with you.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, whatever. Sure. Did you hear about my mom and dad's new dog? I mean, that was kind of the next thing out of my mouth. Like, you just called me your hero, and I just said, did you see my mom and dad's dog? And she's like, hey, you know,
So I think to your point about the dangers of saying things like, you're called to give up your life for Christ or whatever. I think a good example is over the past year with the pandemic. All of the churches that refused to close when the guidelines were that they needed to help stop the spread, because they believed that this is my calling. I have to stay open. This is how the gospel spreads. And this is me loving people by doing what I think needs to, I don't care about my own life here. And I'm risking my life to continue the spread of the gospel. So I believe there was a lot of mentality in that.
So
that
I'm going
probably
to push
was a
back
good-
on this, although I don't disagree with you. And I was part of a denomination that shut, and we did so for a long time. But I tried to look at it from other people's point of view, right? Like I tried to really say, are they just being ugly about this? Or, and some of those folks truly believed that they were being called to continue to
Yeah.
spread the gospel. And I mean, it was a true belief. So I hear what you're saying, and I tend to agree that there was some real selfishness, and I question
Well,
if
no,
all the same Jesus as I do when that happens.
I
But
wasn't even going along the lines of selfishness. I'm saying that there was a belief here in that I'm going to have to give up my life for this.
mhm,
But you
yeah,
can see how easily that is to.
people were willing to give up their lives to get COVID in order to stay true to what they felt like
Yeah.
God was calling them to do.
Yeah.
I mean, we can look at that and say, I disagree. Like
Yeah, a lot of us push back from the Christian standpoint that you're not loving your neighbors by doing that. You
Mhm.
can't.
That's
can't.
the key there, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, but some of those folks would argue and say we are loving our neighbors. We're so concerned. It's really about what do you think that salvation is, right?
Yep.
I mean,
It's back to the soul thing. Yeah.
back, so a lot of those folks, I mean, I had conversation with people. I had people tell me how I couldn't be following Christ because I didn't believe them. I mean, because they were so concerned. Some of them were very convinced that the end of the world was coming. I mean, you could not convince them of that. So they felt like they were on a crusade to save souls. I think they were misguided, but I think they thought they were doing what they needed to do to follow Jesus. And the thing about the church is we're all part of this story with Jesus, and we're going to get things wrong sometimes, and we're going to make mistakes. And part of following Christ is admitting when we make those mistakes. I think that's a key to a believer who is more mature in their faith and moving along that line of sanctification is the willingness to truly apologize, and not just apologize because your feelings were hurt, but truly apologize that your actions caused pain, whether you think you were justified or not. I mean, I think that's a high mark of folks. And being willing to listen when people are saying what you're doing hurts me, that would be one of my others on the list.
Yeah.
Come on, Bowling, you're grinning at me.
Yeah.
No,
You have a thought.
I have lots of thoughts, but they all make sense. But no, I think that's exactly right. And I think the thing is that's why it's so hard to prescribe like an exact list of behaviors, because like we look at the martyrs, and those are some of the examples of people who follow Christ, like, as close as we possibly can. But we can also find people who looked at them and took it the wrong way too, and have done that in a non-Christ-like way. So it's hard to come up with like some kind of list of like, this is what it looks like exactly behavior wise to follow Christ. And instead, I think we're looking at general principles of like that focus on Christ, that self-sacrificial love that just kind of comes through in these types of actions, even though we're not looking like a list of actions you check off and be like, yep, they met A, B, C, and D, therefore they are clearly a Christian.
It's not a barter, and it's not a checklist. It's not like if you check these following behaviors or activities or habits, then your name's written in the book of life. I mean, that's as dangerous as saying you've not said the sinner's prayer at an altar.
Exactly.
And, so, I mean, it can happen. Are there habits and things that you can train yourself to do to be more like Christ? I think absolutely. I mean, that's, I'm in love with the idea of catechism right now. Like, and I think about, you were talking about some of the prayers that you do at the beginning of Mass. It instantly brought to mind some of the prayers that we do in our communion liturgy. Forgive us for not seeing our neighbors, forgive us for not loving the needy, forgive us. We listen to those, and man, it's powerful when you're with a group of people saying that, because then when you're outside of that, you're hopefully, you're holding each other accountable to that.
Yeah, it's the Saint Augustine, lex orandi, lex credendi, like the way we act or the way we pray is the way we wind up believing. Like we can shape our actions with how we worship, and then that, following Christ and doing those things that we find difficult, like you were talking about, sometimes going to church is difficult, sometimes reading the scriptures is difficult. Those can shape us, and those do become like symbols or common things we see in people who are Christians. But yeah, again, making like an explicit list is where I think it just kind of becomes a little difficult.
Yeah. I thought of a real life example of kind of going the extra mile that, and I was thinking about in feeding ministries, right? Like, it's great if you give somebody a hamburger, a bun with meat on it, right? Like, you're feeding their belly. But what does it say to them if they get a meal that has a bun, a hamburger patty, lettuce, tomato, ketchup packet, mustard packet? I mean, you're not just saying, I'm feeding you as an animal, right? I'm feeding as a human being and something that I would want to eat. And that's, I think, when we're doing acts of mercy out of our compassion and love for Christ, we need to ask ourselves that. Am I reflecting Christ's goodness? Is this something that I would consume? Or am I just doing this to ease my conscience? So like when a food pantry asks for food and you go to your cabinets and you pull out the 10 things of vegetables that you've had in your cabinet for a year because you thought it would be a good idea, but you obviously hate them and don't want to eat them, and that's what you give, you're giving out of your your leftovers and not out of your abundance, right? And it says more, the way we treat the poor and the way that we treat the people on the margins says more about who we are in Christ than who they are in Christ. It used to irritate me to no end running a food pantry. People bring food in that's been expired for 10 years. Well, they're not going to eat it, so let's just give it to somebody who's hungry. Like, what the crap? Like, so, I mean, I think that's kind of a marker as well, if you will.
Whatever you do for the least of these, you do for me.
Yeah. I loved it when kids would come to me and say, I put in Chef Boyardee ravioli because it's my favorite. Like, that's what I wanted.
Yeah.
Not, I put in the SpaghettiOs with the meatballs because I hate them and I don't want mom to serve them to me. Right. Like, but as an adults give ourselves a pass. Oh, I just never got around to eating that slimy canned asparagus, so I'll just put it in here because somebody who's hungry won't mind to eat that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, come on now, we can do better.
We can do
better. I
think
that's the key, is to look at this at things that we can do better on, because there's always something we can improve on.
Yep. Amen. All right, Brooke, thank you very much for coming up.
Good topic.
This was another very good topic for Kingdom Livin. So next week, we just realized before we started the podcast that our next podcast is going to be our 1-year anniversary. Woo-hoo. So we're going to have to come up with something special for that. Not sure what it's going to be yet, but it's going to be great.
We just set the expectations real high.
Real high. So yeah, look forward to that. Thanks everyone for joining us. Peace be to you, and have a good night.
Thank you so much for tuning in. We really hope you got some enjoyment out of the podcast this week. Remember to check out our website, www.appalachianliturgy.com, and follow us on all of our social medias. If you want an easy way to support us, though, make sure to subscribe to our channels and like our videos on YouTube. Also, join our email list. for updates and let us know how we're doing. See you next week, everyone. Appalachian Liturgy Podcast is a JRS Studios production.